The warning sirens went off too late. Jax Rivera held on to the control yoke of the stellar drift, his knuckles white as the ship shook violently through the asteroid field. Every console was screaming alarms and red lights flashed across his face, which was covered in sweat. 3 hours ago, the navigation computer had died, leaving him flying blind through a maze of tumbling rock and ice. "Come on, baby, just a little further," he said softly as he guided the old freighter through a gap between two huge asteroids. The ship groaned in protest, and her hull plates screamed as they scraped against the stone. Jax was 32 years old and thin and wiry from years of crawling through engine compartments and hauling heavy equipment. His brown hair was always greasy, and his gray eyes had the tired determination of someone who had learned how to fix things that other people had given up on. He was wearing his usual clothes, coveralls with oil stains over a faded Earth Federation t-shirt, steel-toed boots that had seen better days, and a tool belt that made noise with wrenches and diagnostic scanners. He had been 3 weeks into a 6-month supply run from the outer colonies back to the inner systems when everything went wrong. Not just for him but for everyone. The news feeds were the first sign. Every channel and every frequency was sending out the same impossible message. The galactic credit had failed. Not gone down, not up and down, collapsed. Totally, completely, and tragically useless. Jax had laughed at first. It had to be a trick, some kind of big joke. The galactic credit was the main form of currency used for trade between stars. It was used by thousands of civilizations and hundreds of systems. The Combined Economic Council supported it and quantum encryption was supposed to make it unbreakable. But the reports kept coming. A lot of inflation. Quantum counterfeiting on a level never thought possible. Protocols for security that had worked for hundreds of years fell apart in a single night. Within 48 hours, a credit that could buy a starship was worth less than the data it was stored on. The economy fell apart quickly and brutally. Space stations closed their docks and refused to accept worthless credits for fuel or supplies. Shipping lanes went dark as freighters ran out of power and floated away. All the planets closed their borders and hoarded physical resources. Like an engine without oil, the huge, interconnected web of galactic trade came to a halt. Jax Rivera, a humble mechanic, was stuck in the Kepler belt with half a tank of fuel, failing life support, and about 17 trillion galactic credits in his account. Enough digital currency to buy a small moon, which is now worth nothing. The stellar drift shook as another impact rocked the hull. Jax pulled the controls hard to the left, just missing a crash that would have split the ship in half. He looked at the instruments in a panic, hoping to find something that looked like a safe harbor. Finally, he saw it. A weak energy signal coming from a potato-shaped asteroid that was about 2 kilometers wide. Not real. There was something there. "Please be nice," Jax whispered as he changed his course. "Please don't be pirates. Please don't be." The engine on the right side blew up. The blast threw Jax against his restraints, and the cockpit filled with smoke that smelled bad. Emergency systems kicked in, but they were losing the fight. She was taking him with her as the stellar drift died. Jax didn't think. Years of training for emergencies took over. He turned off the last engine to stop a chain reaction, sent all the power to the forward shields, and aimed the ship directly at the asteroid's energy signature. It wasn't a landing, it was a controlled crash, and barely that. The crash knocked him out. When Jax woke up, his head hurt and his mouth tasted like blood. The cockpit was lit up in a dim blue light by the emergency lights. The air smelled like burnt electronics and coolant. Every alarm that was still working was going off. He fumbled with his restraints, his fingers were clumsy, and he fell out of the pilot's seat. His diagnostic scanner was still in perfect condition on his belt. He grabbed it and quickly checked the ship systems. The results made his stomach drop. The main engine was broken. The backup engine is not working. Life support, there are 6 hours of oxygen left. Navigation, dead. Communications, not working. Hull integrity, broken in 4 places. The stellar drift would never fly again. Jax leaned against the bulkhead and let that sink in. The ship held everything he owned. His tools, his things, and his whole life. And now it was all junk, crashed on an asteroid in the middle of nowhere, with an economy that had collapsed so completely that he couldn't even afford to call for help. For a long time he thought about just sitting there and letting the oxygen run out. Then he saw his tool belt and felt something change in his chest. He worked as a mechanic. "Okay," he said to the empty cockpit, his voice hoarse. Mechanics didn't give up, they fixed things. "Let's see what we've got." Jax put on his bulky, uncomfortable emergency pressure suit, which still worked even though it was 10 years old. Then he cycled through the airlock. The asteroid's gravity was very weak, just strong enough to keep his boots on the ground. With each step, he bounced slowly across the rocky ground. The landscape was empty. Gray stone went on, with craters and scars from old impacts all over it. But Jax could see buildings about 50 meters from where he crashed. They looked like a group of prefabricated buildings around what looked like a central hub. Some of the buildings were dark and obviously empty, but others had faint signs of power. As he got closer, he realized he was looking at a salvage yard. The remains of dozens, no hundreds of spacecraft were scattered across the surface of the asteroid. Freighters, shuttles, fighters, and ships from civilizations that Jax didn't even know about. Some were mostly whole, while others had been taken apart and left with just their frames. It was a graveyard of technology, a monument to journeys that had ended here. The central hub was an old trading post, and its entrance was blocked by a heavy airlock door. The sign above it, which was faded, said Waystation Theta 7 in several languages. Someone had spray-painted a newer message below that said, "Closed. No credits accepted." Jax tried the door. It was locked, but his scanner picked up on the other side. He got out his plasma cutter and started working on the hinges. They could shoot him or help him if anyone was still inside. Either way was better than being stuck on the surface. The door fell in with a hollow clang. Jax walked into a dark hallway that smelled like oil and recycled air. The emergency lights above flickered. He could hear the humming of generators in the distance, which meant that someone was keeping the power on. "Hello?" he yelled, and his voice echoed. "I'm not here to cause trouble. My ship crashed. I'm just looking for help." No one answered. Jax walked further into the station, his hand resting on the wrench at his waist. The hallway led to a bigger room that used to be a trading floor. The walls were lined with rows of empty vendor stalls. Holographic displays hung there, dark and dead. Everything felt empty and deserted, like a place where people had left in a hurry. Then he heard voices. Jax followed the sound to a side room that turned out to be a cantina. A few people inside were hunched over tables and talking in low, tense voices. He recognized three species: a Vrexian, which was tall and insect-like with compound eyes that sparkled in the low light, a pair of Kelturians whose blue crystalline skin reflected the emergency lights, and something that looked like a floating mass of tentacles inside a clear environmental suit, a Kolari if Jax remembered his xenobiology correctly. When he walked in, they all stopped talking and turned to look at him. The Vrexian was the first to speak, and its translator turned its clicks and buzzes into flat, synthetic English. "Human. Is the wreckage we found your ship?" "Yeah," Jax said, raising his hands to show he wasn't going to hurt anyone. "Engine blew out. I'm stuck." "Join the club," one of the Kelturians said. It sounded like rocks grinding together when it spoke. "Some of us have been here for months," Jax said as he looked around the room and really saw them. They weren't just people on vacation. They were people who had to leave their homes. Their clothes were old and their gear was broken. They looked like people who had been living on hope that was running out. "The credit collapse?" he asked. The Kolari's translator made a sound like sad wind chimes. "We all had full accounts. Enough credits to buy fuel, supplies, and a way home. Now those accounts are just numbers that don't mean anything. The station's automated systems still work, but they won't give you anything without real payment." "What about cash?" Jax asked. "Trade goods, precious metals?" The Vrexian made a sound that could have been laughter. "This is a way station in the middle of an asteroid field, human. There are no markets here. No merchants. The people who ran this place fled when the collapse happened, taking everything portable with them. We're left with infrastructure we can't access and ships we can't repair." Jax felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. He knew things were bad, but hearing them spelled out like this made them real. They weren't just stuck. They were in an economic prison with resources they couldn't use because trade had completely broken down. "How are you surviving?" he asked. "Barely," said the second Kelturian. "We share what little we have. The station's water recyclers still work. There's an old hydroponics bay that produces enough to keep us alive, if not well-fed. But ships need more than food and water. They need parts, fuel, and skilled repairs." "I'm a mechanic," Jax said without thinking. "I can fix things," he said. The people in the room looked at him with a mix of hope and doubt. "With what tools?" the Vrexian asked. "What materials? We have broken ships and no way to fix them. Even if you could fix mine, I don't have any fuel to fly it. I can't even pay for fuel if it existed." Jax's mind was racing. He looked around the cantina and saw it in a new way. These creatures had given up. They were either waiting for someone to come and save them, for the economy to fix itself, or more likely for their supplies to run out. But Jax hadn't spent 15 years as a mechanic waiting for things to get better. He had learned how to make the most of what he had, how to see the good in broken things, and how to make something useful out of junk. An idea was starting to come to him. It was crazy, maybe even impossible, but it was something. What if, he said slowly, we didn't need credits? The room went quiet. Explain, the Kolari said. Jax took off his helmet and ran a hand through his greasy hair. Look, I'm just a mechanic, not an economist. But I know how to value parts. I know that a working hyperdrive coil is worth more than a broken one. That a rare component from a military-grade ship is worth more than a common civilian part. What if we built a system based on that? Direct trade of actual, physical components. Barter? The Vrexian sounded dismissive. That's not very smart. It's not very useful. Maybe, Jack said. But it's better than nothing. And this salvage yard, he pointed out the window where a sea of wrecked ships stretched across the asteroid's surface. It's full of parts. Millions of them just sitting there. What if we cataloged them? Checked their condition, their rarity, and their usefulness? Made a real system of value based on what things can actually do, not on digital numbers that can be faked or inflated away. The beings looked at each other. Jax could see the wheels turning, hope fighting against despair. It's crazy, the first Kelturian said at last. It's survival, Jax said in response. I'm stuck here just like you. My ship is junk. But I have skills and there's a whole graveyard of technology out there. We can either sit here and wait to die or we can build something new. The Kolari floated closer, its tentacles pressing against the inside of its suit. You'd be in charge of this? Making the catalog and setting prices? I'd need help, Jax said. People who know different types of ships and technologies. But yes, I could start it. I have scanning equipment and diagnostic tools. I know how to test parts and make sure they work. For the first time since Jax had entered the cantina, he saw something other than despair on the faces around him. It wasn't quite hope yet, it was more like the chance of hope. The first weak hint of an idea that maybe, just maybe, they weren't completely doomed. The Vrexian stood up and moved slowly. I am Tekrix. I used to be a systems engineer before I became a stranded refugee. I know how power distribution networks and energy systems work. Morlach, said the first Kelturian who also stood up. Specialist in propulsion. Serene, the second Kelturian said. Sensor arrays and communications. The Kolari's translator said, I am Quilmera. I know about the technologies of 17 different civilizations and how they work together. Jax felt something warm spread through his chest. This was it. This was the time. A dozen people who had just met were now together because they were desperate and had a glimmer of an idea. He held out his hand, which is a very human gesture. Jax Rivera. Let's go see what we can build from the wreckage. That first night, or what passed for night in the asteroid's timeless environment, Jax lay awake in the small room he'd been given at the station. It was a small room just big enough for a bunk and a storage locker, but it was warm and pressurized, which made it feel like a palace compared to his dying ship. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with the enormity of what he had suggested. Building a new economy from the ground up? He was a mechanic who had barely passed his economics classes at the academy. It was ridiculous. Not possible. But what else could they do? Jax remembered his father, Marcus Rivera, who had taught him how to fix engines and keep systems running. Son, his dad used to say, when the machine's broken you don't wish for a new one. You figure out what pieces you've got and make them work. The galactic economy was the broken machine. The pieces were in the salvage yard and Jax Rivera, for better or worse, was going to make them work. He smiled as he fell asleep. They would start building something new the next day. Something real. Something that couldn't be faked, inflated, or hacked. They would start to show that value wasn't about money or credits. It was about what you could do with your hands and your mind. It was about fixing things that were broken. Dawn on an asteroid was a human idea that didn't make sense, but Jax woke up at 0600 station time anyway, even though there was no sun. He put on his coveralls, checked his tool belt, and went to the cantina where they had agreed to meet. The other people were already there. Tekrix stood next to a wall-mounted display and moved holographic schematics around with precise movements of its chitinous limbs. Morlach and Serene, the Kelturians, were having a long talk. Their bodies were crystalline and vibrating at a frequency that Jax could feel more than hear. Quilmera was floating close to the ceiling, and its tentacles were moving through the air in ways that made it look like it was thinking. Morlach said, "You really came," when Jax walked in. "I thought you might realize how crazy this idea was and stay in bed." Jax said, "Oh, I know it's crazy," as he poured himself something that looked like coffee from a machine. It was hot and caffeinated, but it tasted like motor oil. But right now all we have is crazy. More beings came in over the next hour. People in the small group of stranded travelers had heard the news. Jax counted 15 people from 9 different species who were all ready to start. They were all willing to try something new. Jax stood on a table so that everyone could see him. He wasn't very good at speaking in front of people, but he had learned how to brief work crews before. "Okay, pay attention," he said. "Here's the deal. We're stuck on an asteroid with about 300 wrecked ships that are all falling apart. The old economy is dead and we need a new one right now, not someday when governments figure things out." He took out his datapad and put a simple diagram on the wall. "This is my idea, the component exchange. We make a list of every usable part in this graveyard, test each one to make sure it works, and then rate its rarity and usefulness. Finally, we make a database, a real, physical database that isn't connected to any network and is stored locally, that lists what we have and how much it's worth." "What is worth based on?" asked a reptilian creature that Jax didn't know. If he remembered correctly, it was a Sethian. "Need and lack," Jax said. "A working hyperdrive coil for a Vrexian cruiser is only worth something if there is a Vrexian cruiser that needs one. A sensor array from a military ship is worth more than one from a civilian transport because military-grade parts are harder to find and last longer. We let utility and availability decide value, just like any real market." "And what about exchange?" Tekrix asked. "How do we make that trade happen if I need a power coupling and someone else needs a sensor module?" "At first it was direct barter," Jax said. "We build a marketplace which is a real place where people can trade. But we keep records of who has what and who needs what. If this works, we might be able to make vouchers or something like that, physical tokens that stand for verified parts so you don't have to carry an engine core to trade for a fuel cell." The forked tongue of the Sethian flickered. "This is very basic. Not very useful." "Yeah," Jax said. "It is. But you know what's even less efficient? Sitting here hungry with billions of credits worth of salvage that we can't use because credits don't mean anything anymore." That put an end to the complaints. Jax went on, "Here's the plan. We broke up into groups. Salvage teams to get parts from wrecks, testing teams to make sure everything works, and catalog teams to write down everything. I'll be in charge of the technical evaluations, and Tekrix will be in charge of the database. Any questions?" Quilmer's tentacles moved. "How long do you think this will take?" Jax had done the math in his head. "To catalog everything? Months, maybe years. But we don't need everything cataloged to start trading. We just need enough to prove the concept works. I'm thinking we can have a working market in 2 weeks if we push hard." 2 weeks. Even as he said it, it sounded impossible, but he could see the math happening in everyone's eyes. 2 weeks of hard work or slowly starving. It was clear what to do. Morlack stood up and said, "I'm in. There's a plasma manifold in this graveyard that I need for my ship. If you can find it, I'll help you find 1,000 other parts to get it." One by one the others said yes. The work started right away. Jax put them into 3 main groups. Morlack led Team 1, which would do the dangerous work of cutting into wrecks and taking out parts. Tekrix was in charge of Team 2, which would test each part with any diagnostic tools they could find or make. Quilmera was in charge of Team 3, which would make a list of everything, including its specifications, condition, compatibility, and estimated value. Jax moved from team to team, fixing problems, making choices, and dealing with the 100 little problems that came up every hour. The first wreck they worked on was a Terran freighter that was like Jax's own stellar drift. It had crashed into the asteroid decades ago, and the hull had broken open like an egg. But inside, safe from the vacuum, were parts that had stayed whole. Jax crawled through the tight hallways, and the metal of his pressure suit scraped against the walls. His helmet light lit up the inside, which looked like a frozen picture of disaster. The emergency lights were still on, but they were very dim. In zero gravity, personal items floated around, including pictures, a child's toy, and a data pad that was frozen in the middle of a sentence. He tried not to think about the crew that had died here. He found what he was looking for in the engine room, a hyperdrive core that for some reason still showed signs of power. Jax checked it for damage with his scanner. The housing was broken, but the core itself looked fine. He yelled over the radio, "Morlack, bring the sled. I think we have a live one." It took 3 hours of careful work to get the core out. They had to cut through support structures, turn off safety interlocks, and carefully move the huge part out through the broken hull. But when they finally put it on the sled and took it back to the testing facility that Tekrix had set up, Jax felt a rush of happiness. This was real. Real. In a way that digital credits could never be. The rest of the day Tekrix looked at the core. It had a decision by the time the station closed. Functional, the Vrection said, and the translator crackled with what could have been excitement. About 78% efficient. Works with all Terran ships and 63% of Kelturian designs. If installed correctly, it could power a medium freighter for travel between stars. Value assessment? Jax asked. The compound eyes of Tekrik sparkled. Immense. There are 4 Terran ships stuck at this station alone. This one part could get one of them home. That was heavy for Jax. One part. One family that could leave this place. One ship that could take news of what they were making here to the rest of the galaxy. Log it, he said. Put it at the top of the list of trade goods. Now let's find 3 more like it. The same thing happened again and again over the next few days. There was a puzzle box of possible value in each wreck. Some gave up treasures like working life support systems, intact NAV computers, and rare alloys that could be reprocessed. Others were letdowns because their parts were too damaged or too common to be worth the trouble of getting them out. But the database grew slowly and carefully. Jax came up with a way to sort things. Class A parts are rare, very useful, and useful for everyone. These were the most valuable things. Hyperdrive cores, antimatter containment units, and military-grade sensor arrays. Class B. Normal but necessary things that are in good shape like power couplings, hull plates, and standard navigation systems. Class C. A lot of salvage that could be reused or turned into raw materials. Quilmera was very helpful because it knew so much about different technologies that it could figure out which designs would work with which species. It turned out that a Vrection power cell could be made to work in Kelturian ships with only a few changes. Using a simple protocol converter, a Sethian communications array could connect to Terran systems. The salvage yard was full of activity. People who had been listless and hopeless before now worked with a goal. The sound of plasma cutters and welding torches echoed across the asteroid. At night, the cantina was full of tired but lively conversations as teams shared information and compared notes. They did their first real trade on the 5th day. A Vrection merchant named Zilix came up to Jax in the testing area. Zilix had been stuck for almost 2 months because a power surge during the credit collapse fried the main computer on his ship. He had been living on emergency rations, watching his supplies run out while his high-tech trading ship sat there doing nothing. "Hey, I heard you found a Vrection NAV computer," Zilix said, and his translator made his clicks sound almost nervous. Jax looked at his datapad. "Yeah, I got it from a military scout ship 3 days ago. It's a Class A component that works perfectly. What do you want for it?" And there it was. The moment that would decide if this crazy plan really worked. Jax thought about it a lot. He couldn't just pick a random price. This had to be a real exchange with real value. "What do you want to trade?" Zilix made a data crystal. "This has full star charts for the outer rim sectors, including secret paths that go around the main patrol zones. This is valuable information for business, or it would be if the economy hadn't crashed." "Not good enough," Jax said, but not in a mean way. "Information is useful, but right now we need real things more." "What else?" The Vrection thought for a moment, then pointed to his ship, which could be seen through the facility's window. "I have a fabrication unit on my ship. It's industrial grade and can turn raw materials into standard parts. It still works." That was interesting. Jax's mind was racing with all the things that could happen. They could take Class C salvage, which is damaged and common parts, and turn them into useful materials with a fabrication unit. That would make the whole operation worth a lot more. "The part of the NAV computer that makes it work," Jax said. "Plus help with installation. You show my team how to use it." Zilix's antennas shook. "That unit cost me 40,000 credits when the economy was stable. And now credits are useless," Jax said softly. "But that NAV computer can help you get home." "What does that mean?" The silence went on and on. Jax could see Zilix's compound eyes doing the math. Finally, the Vrection's shoulders, or what looked like shoulders, sagged in defeat. "Done. But I'll help with the installation. I want to make sure you all know how to take care of it." Jax reached out his hand. "Deal." They shook hands, which was a clumsy way for a human and an alien to communicate, but it was clear what they meant. That night, Jax stood in the middle of the station and watched Zilix's ship take off from the asteroid. It had a new navigation computer that was set up and ready to go. The engines lit up blue-white in the dark, and then it was gone, jumping to hyperspace and disappearing into the stars. One ship is safe. One person going home. And in exchange they got a fabrication unit that could turn trash into treasure. Quilmera floated next to him and its tentacles glowed softly. "Do you know what you've done, Jax Rivera?" "Made a trade?" he asked, even though he knew the Kolari meant something else. You've shown that it works. News will get out. Other travelers who are stuck will come here, hoping for the same chance Zilix had. When they do, Jack said, we'll need more stock. More systems. More order. Yes. This is no longer a last-ditch effort to stay alive. You've made something that could last through the crisis. Jax looked at the stars and felt the weight of that duty settle on his shoulders. He was only a mechanic. He made things work. But somehow, while he was working on his own survival issue, he had begun to fix something much bigger. Then we should make sure we do it right, he said in a low voice. The component exchange had recorded more than 10,000 separate items by the end of the second week. The testing facility was open all day and night. The salvage teams had come up with quick ways to take apart wrecks. And most importantly, people were making deals. A small one at first, a fuel cell for a communications relay. A sensor module for a batch of titanium that has already been processed. But every successful exchange proved that the system worked and that value could exist outside of credits and currencies. Jax didn't get much sleep. There was always a new problem to solve, a new part to check, or a new trade to settle. His coveralls were always dirty with grease and metal shavings. He had cuts and burns all over his hands. But for the first time since the economy fell apart, he felt like he was making progress instead of just getting by. Tekrix called an evening meeting in the cantina on the 14th day. The Vrection had been gathering data, and what it showed them made Jax's heart stop. We have successfully facilitated 47 trades, Tekrix said, showing the information on the wall. 12 ships have been fixed so they can fly again. 8 have left the station. Our active participant base has grown from 15 to 63 beings from 19 different species. 63. Jax looked at the number. 8 ships had left, but they had more people than they had lost. So, they're coming here on purpose, Serene said, saying what everyone else was thinking. Word is getting out. Travelers who are stuck are coming to Way Station Theta 7 because they know they can trade here. A woman from Earth that Jax didn't know stood up. Lauren Hayes had come 3 days earlier on a cargo hauler full of rare metals that she couldn't sell. A salvage crew near the Kepler belt told me about this place. They said there was a human mechanic on an asteroid who had figured out how to value things again. I thought they were joking, but here I am. How did they know? Jax asked. Zilix, the Vrection you traded with. He's been telling everyone he meets that you saved his life and didn't even charge him credits for it. People are calling this place the Component Exchange like it's a real school. Jax felt something turn in his stomach. This was getting bigger than he thought it would. They weren't just getting by anymore, they were building a new economy and people were starting to notice. Quilmera said, we need to make this official. Set clear rules and standardize tests. If more people are coming, we need to be consistent. Agreed, Tekrix said. I suggest we form a council to oversee operations. Each major trade specialization should have a representative to make sure everything is fair and knowledgeable. The holographic display showed Morlach's crystalline face. We need to grow, and this station's testing facility can't handle the volume if we keep growing. We need more equipment, more space, and more people who know how to evaluate components. Jax knew they were right. But the idea of growing and making what had started as a desperate plan to stay alive official made him nervous. He wasn't a businessman or an administrator. He was a mechanic. Jax. Tekrix was staring at him. You've been quiet. What are you thinking? Jax rubbed his sleepy eyes. I think we're onto something real here. Something that could help a lot of people. But we have to be careful. The moment we start getting complicated, start adding layers of bureaucracy, we risk becoming like the old system, abstract, disconnected from actual value. Lauren Hayes said, then we keep it simple. Real things, checked quality and open trades. No digital currencies, no promises, just things you can touch and use. And we scale carefully, said Kravik, a Celestian engineer with 4 arms. Add capacity when you need it, but always remember the main idea. Utility equals value. Jax looked around the room at these people from all over the galaxy who had somehow become his co-workers, teammates, and friends. They were working together on something important. Okay, he finally said. We do this right. We grow and make things more formal, but we never forget why we started. Because credits failed, but wrenches, circuit boards, and hyperdrive coils are real. They do real work. That's the foundation we build on. The meeting went on until late at night, setting rules and procedures. The component exchange went from being Jax's crazy idea to a real organization with rules, supervision, and big plans by the time they were done. Tekrix stayed behind as the others left. You don't like being successful, the Vrection said. Jax laughed, but it was a tired laugh. Is it really that clear? You are a mechanic and you like problems with clear answers. This, Tecrix pointed to the station around them, is organic and unpredictable. It grows beyond your control. Yes, Jack said. That scares me. What if we mess up? What if this system breaks down like the last one? Jax had learned that when Tecrix's antennae drooped, it meant he felt sorry for him. All systems can be hacked, Jax Rivera. The question is whether the foundation is strong enough to resist. You've built this on real-world things like utility and scarcity. That's harder to fake than digital promises. I hope you're right. Time will tell. But for now you should get some sleep. 3 more ships will arrive tomorrow looking for trades. Your component exchange is waiting. Jax nodded because he was too tired to fight. He walked past the viewport that showed the salvage yard on his way back to his small room. As teams worked through the night shift, lights lit up the field of wrecks, showing how they were making money from the destruction. In its own strange way it was beautiful. And it was only the start. 3 weeks later, a ship appeared at the edge of the asteroid field. It was nothing like what Jax had seen at the component exchange. It was huge, like a real merchant ship that used to carry cargo worth millions of credits between star systems. The hull was shiny silver and black, and it was clear that it had been well cared for even though the economy had collapsed. The person who owned this ship hadn't gone through the terrible decline that most of the ships limping into Waystation Theta 7 had. As the ship asked for docking clearance, Jax watched from the main control room. Tecrix stood next to him, looking at the sensor display with both of his compound eyes. The Vrexian said, "That ship is a consortium-class trading ship. Built for business on a galactic scale. The power signature shows that it's running at full capacity. Whoever is piloting that has a lot of money." "Why would someone with money come here?" Jax asked. An hour later, the ship's captain asked to meet with him and he got his answer. Nira Vex was her name and she walked into the conference room like she owned it. She was Kelturian, and her body was made of crystals that were deep purple with veins of gold running through them. Her flight suit was custom-made and probably cost more than Jax's whole ship. A human man, a Vrexian woman, and something that looked like a moving plant followed her. "Mr. Rivera," Nira said with a sweet and sure voice. "I've heard amazing things about what you do here." Jax felt very underdressed in his coveralls that were stained with grease and boots that were scuffed. "Just Jax is fine. What do you need?" Nira sat down in a chair with practiced ease. "I represent a number of businesses in the Inner Rim, including shipping guilds, corporations, and manufacturing companies. They all have the same problem. The credit system has broken down, but they still have to run their businesses, move goods, and keep their infrastructure in good shape. They need a solution." "And they think I have one?" Jax said with doubt. "You've shown that trading physical assets can work," Nira said. "Word of the component exchange has spread throughout this sector. You've facilitated dozens of successful trades, helped numerous vessels return to flight-worthy status, all without using a single credit. That's attracted attention." Tecrix's antennas shook. "What kind of attention?" Nira smiled, showing off her clear teeth. "The productive kind. My clients are ready to put money into your business. They want to help you grow by giving you equipment, staff, and other resources. In return, they want special trading access and a say in how the business is run." Jax's stomach tightened. "You want to buy the component exchange. Partner with it," Nira said smoothly. "Jax, you've built something impressive, but you're using salvaged equipment in a converted space station. Just think of what you could do with proper facilities, modern testing equipment, and a fleet of salvage vessels. We could expand this operation to other systems." Morlach's voice was sharp as he asked, "What do you want in return?" The human male who worked for Nira stepped forward with a datapad. "Standard partnership agreement. Your council is in charge of day-to-day operations, and our consortium provides resources and infrastructure. The profits are split 60/40ths. Jax said, "We don't have any profits. We're not selling anything, we help people trade." "But you could," Nira said, leaning forward. "Right now you're running a market. With our help you could become a bank. You could issue vouchers backed by real assets. These vouchers could be used as a new kind of currency, stable, backed by real assets, and not subject to the quantum counterfeiting that ruined galactic credits." There was no sound in the room. Jax could see that everyone was doing math in their heads. Nira's offer was tempting, a chance to really fix the currency problem with real assets. It could help billions of people who are stuck because of the economy going down. But something didn't seem right. "Okay, I'll think about it," Jax said at last. "I need to talk about this with the whole council." Nira's smile never faded. "Sure. Take your time. I'll be here for 3 days. My ship needs some minor repairs. Maybe we could make a deal while I'm here? I have rare alloys from the Celestian foundries that might be of interest to you. Jax said, we'll see what we can do, without making any promises. When Nira and her group left, Tekrix looked at Jax. You don't believe her. I don't trust anyone who talks business with a smile on their face, Jax said. She came here with a ship that was fully fueled and a crew during an economic collapse. That means she's either very lucky or she had resources before the crisis. Either way, people like that don't help unless they get more out of it than we do. But the idea has merit, Quilmera said as she floated through the door. An interstellar trade revolution could happen if there was a stable currency backed by real assets. Or give power to whoever controls that currency, Morlock said in response. Which would be the group that Nira is a part of. Jax took off his work gloves and threw them on the table. Set up a meeting of the council. Everyone needs to have a say in this. The argument went on for 6 hours. The council now had members from all of the main trade areas. There were 15 people at the conference table and they were all arguing. Some people saw Nira's plan as a way to save the galaxy's trade and bring back stability. Some people thought it was a corporate takeover that was pretending to be a partnership. Lauren Hayes, who worked for the Terran Cargo Company, was very doubtful. I've worked with corporate consortia before the collapse. They promise to be partners but really just want to control everything. We would end up working for them, not with them. But think about the reach, Kravik, the Celestian engineer, said. We're stuck on this asteroid and with the ships that happen to find us. With consortium support, we could set up component exchanges in many systems and help thousands instead of dozens. At what cost? Morlock asked. Once we add abstract vouchers, we're back to money. Money can be manipulated, inflated, and counterfeited. We'd be building the same system that failed. Tekrix said, not if the vouchers are properly protected. Physical tokens that are quantum locked and have blockchain verification of the assets they stand for. It might work. Could, Jack said in a low voice, and everyone in the room stopped talking. Everyone looked at him. That word bothers me. Could work. The old credit system could have worked too, if security protocols hadn't been broken and quantum counterfeiting hadn't gotten out of control. We're building the component exchange on things that are real and present. A hyperdrive coil either works or it doesn't. You can't inflate a power coupling or counterfeit a sensor array. The moment we introduce abstraction, vouchers, currencies, promises of value instead of actual value, we open the door to the same failures. A Sethian trader named Vask asked, so we refuse the consortium? I don't know yet, Jack said. But before we make a decision, I want to know more about the people we're dealing with. Lauren, you said you've worked with corporate consortiums. Can you look into Nira Vek's past and find out who she really works for? Lauren nodded her head. I have connections. I'll find out what I can. The next day, Lauren found something that changed everything. She trapped Jax in the testing facility and looked angry. You were right to be suspicious. Nira Vex is the Orion Shipping Consortium's representative, but they're not just a merchant guild. Before the credit collapse, they were one of the biggest financial institutions in the Inner Rim. They didn't just move cargo, they also underwrote insurance, gave loans, and handled currency exchange. Financial services, Jack said, and things started to make sense. They made money by controlling the flow of credits. Exactly. They lost everything when the collapse happened. Not their physical assets. They still have ships, warehouses, and infrastructure. But their whole business model disappeared. They need a new currency system to get back to where they were in the market. And they want to use the component exchange as the base, Tekrix said, joining in. We give them legitimacy and operational knowledge, and they give us scale and resources. But in the end, they'd be in charge of the new financial system. Jax could feel anger rising in his chest. We're not going to rebuild the old system or make another network of middlemen who make money by handling transactions. That's not what the component exchange is for. Lauren asked, what is it for then? He stopped when he heard the question. Jax understood that he had been so focused on staying alive and making the system work every day that he hadn't explained the bigger picture. Finally, he said, it's for direct exchange. Person to person, need to need. No middlemen, no abstract representations of value. You have something I need and we trade. It's that simple. It's real. No one makes money just by making the connection. Kravik, who had followed them into the testing facility, said, that doesn't scale. You can't run a galactic economy on bartering in person. Maybe not, Jack said. But maybe a galactic economy is part of the problem. Maybe we don't need one big system, but thousands of small exchanges, each taking care of its own area and based on real life. Let them connect naturally through need, not through centralized control. A network of independent exchanges, Quilmera said with a thoughtful look on her face. Each one is separate but can work with the others. There is no central authority or currency monopoly. Tekrix said, it's radical. It's necessary, Jax said in response. The centralized system didn't work. Adding new paint won't fix it. We need something completely different. Jax was ready when Nira Vex came back the next day for her answer. They met again in the conference room, but this time Jax had all of the council members there to see it. Nira came in with the same confident smile, but Jax could see that she was thinking in her clear eyes. Jax started right away by saying, "We've thought about your offer. And we're saying no." Nira's smile faded for a brief moment. "That's disappointing. Can I ask why?" "Because what you're suggesting isn't a partnership. It's rebuilding the old financial system with new management. You want to use the component exchange to make a new currency and a new group of middlemen who make money by managing that currency. That's exactly what failed. We're giving you tools and knowledge. At the cost of control," Jax said. "The component exchange works because it's direct and clear. Physical goods are traded based on how useful they are. But as soon as we add your voucher system, we've created abstraction, and abstraction lets people change things." Nira's helpers shifted around uncomfortably, but the merchant stayed calm. "You're holding yourself back, Jax. The component exchange could help millions, but only if it doesn't stay stuck on one asteroid. Then we'll grow in a different way," Jax said. "We'll gladly share our methods with anyone who wants to start their own component exchange. No franchise fees, no licensing, and no central control. Let 1,000 exchanges bloom, each one serving its own area and being its own thing." "That's crazy," Nira's human helper said. "No," Morlach said in a low voice. "That's resilience. 1,000 separate exchanges can't all fail at the same time. There's no one point of failure and no central authority to corrupt or compromise." Nira stood still, her body like glass. "You're wrong. The galaxy needs structure and order. What you're suggesting is chaos." "Maybe," Jax said. "But it's anarchy based on real life, which is more stable than order based on digital illusions." Nira looked at him for a long time. Then she slowly nodded. "I understand that you won't change your mind. The Orion Consortium's offer is no longer valid. We'll look for other options." "Good luck," Jax said, and he meant it. "I hope you find them." Quilmera floated next to Jax after Nira and her group left. "You just turned down resources that could have made this business grow by leaps and bounds." "I know," Jax said in a low voice. "But I also kept us free and the system honest. Time will tell if that was smart or dumb." "Yeah," Jax said. "Time will tell." But things were already proving him right. 2 days after Nira Vex left, Jax got a tight beam message from a Terran colony in the Proxima system. It was from an unexpected source. Traders had told them about the component exchange and they wanted to make their own. The colony administrator said over the crackling connection, "We have a salvage yard here. Mostly mining tools and ships for moving things. Can we use your method?" "Of course," Jax said. "I'll send you everything, our cataloging rules, our assessment criteria, and our trading rules. No charge, no strings. Just promise me you'll be honest. Real goods, clear trades, no abstractions." "You're just giving this away?" the administrator asked, sounding shocked. "Don't keep ideas to yourself," Jax said. "They should spread. We're all in the same boat trying to get through this crisis." People heard about that choice faster than any ad campaign could have gotten the word out. Within a week, Jax was getting requests from 10 different systems. In just 1 month, there were 43 separate component exchanges set up across the galaxy. Each one was independent but followed the same basic rules. They freely shared information, warned each other about fake parts or dishonest traders, and helped each other fix technical problems. But each exchange still worked on its own, helping its own community without any central control. And somehow it worked even though it shouldn't have. Some ships that had been stuck for months found the parts they needed. Trade links were re-established between colonies that had been cut off from each other. The credit system was still broken, so the galactic economy didn't recover. But something new was growing around the ruins. Something real, strong, and spread out. 3 months after turning down Nira Vex's offer, Jax stood in the main control room and watched status reports come in from exchanges all over the galaxy. Tekrix was next to him working on the data. The Vrexian said, "There are now 78 exchanges, making an estimated 6,000 trades every day. No failures, no scandals, no centralization. It's amazing." "It's needed," Jax said. We didn't have the time to make it perfect, so we made something that could survive being imperfect. Tekrix said, Niravex was wrong. This isn't chaos. It's emergence, order that comes from applying simple rules in a small area. Jax smiled. You're giving me too much credit? I just used the tools I had to build what made sense. That's exactly what makes it work, Quilmera said as she floated into the room. You thought like a mechanic, not an economist. You valued function over theory. They might have been right. Or maybe Jax just got lucky. But as he looked at those status reports, which showed beings who could now trade, survive, and build, he felt something he hadn't felt since the stellar drift crashed on this asteroid. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing hope of someone who is dying slowly, but the hope of someone who had built something real with their own hands and seen it work. The component exchange began as a way to stay alive. It was turning into something much bigger. The first sign of trouble came on a normal morning in the 4th month of the component exchange's operation. Jax was in Workshop 3, helping a young Terran engineer named Marcus Chin figure out what was wrong with a broken power regulator. That's when Tekrix's voice came through his comm with an unusual sense of urgency. Jax, the main office right now. Jax dropped his tools and ran because of the way the Vrexian spoke. He saw Tekrix in the main hub with Morlach, Serene, and a trader Jax knew as Velix. Velix was a Kolari who had been one of their best customers, making successful trades every week for the past 2 months. Velix's tentacles were moving around in its environmental suit, which showed that it was in a lot of pain. Show him, Tekrix said with a grim face. Velix took a small device out of its suit. It looked like a regular Vrexian sensor array, which their catalog says is a Class B component. The trader's translation tool made worried sounds. I traded 3 good power couplings for this array 2 days ago. The seller had proof from the component exchange that it was real. Everything seemed fine. And? Jax asked, even though he was already dreading the answer. It's not real, Morlach said flatly. A hollowed-out housing filled with useless parts. It looks right, weighs right, and even passes quick scans. But it doesn't work. Jax's blood ran cold. He picked up the fake sensor array and turned it over in his hands. The craftsmanship was amazing. The person who made this knew a lot about starship parts. They had perfectly copied the outside, right down to the serial numbers and wear patterns. Who sold it? He asked. Velix said, a Sethian trader named Karvik. He had the right exchange paperwork and said he got it from a military wreck in Sector 7. Is Karvik still around? He left yesterday, Tekrix said. Before Velix found out about the lie. Jax put the fake part on the table and his mind raced. He was afraid of this, the corruption that crept into any system of value. But he thought that the fact that they were exchanging things in person would make it too hard and too obvious to make fake ones. He had been wrong. How many trades did Karvik do before he left? Jax asked. Tekrix brought up records on the holographic screen. 7 in the last 3 weeks. He got 17 Class B and Class C parts in exchange for things he said he had found. We have to find everyone who did business with him, Jax said. Check each part he gave you. If this one is fake, the others might be too. They did an emergency audit over the next 6 hours. The results were worse than Jax had thought they would be. 5 of the 7 trades Karvik made involved fake parts. They are sophisticated fakes, but they are still fakes. The Sethian had gotten real, useful parts in exchange for trash that cost a lot of money. The people who had been cheated met in the main conference room, where their anger was clear. Rivik, a Celestian hauler captain, slammed his 4 hands on the table. I traded a working hyperdrive modulator for that junk. Rivik's voice echoed off the walls. That modulator could have gotten my ship home, but now it's gone and I'm still stuck. We'll make this right, Jax said, trying to sound calm when he wasn't. The component exchange will take out the fake parts. What do you mean? Asked a Terran woman named Sarah Okonkwo. Your inventory? What will happen when people find out that the powerful component exchange was tricked by fake parts? Who will trust your verification after this? People in the room yelled angrily. Jax stood there, feeling the weight of his failure. He had built this system on trust and openness, but now both were broken. Everyone in this room had been hurt because the exchange's verification process didn't work. Tekrix's translator made sense of the mess. Be quiet. The Vrexian's compound eyes shone with an unusual brightness. Pointing fingers doesn't help. We have a problem that needs a solution. Jax, what do you think? Jax took a deep breath and told himself to think like a mechanic instead of a guilty person. When a system broke, you didn't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. You found the problem and fixed it. He said, the process of verification is broken. We've been relying on visual inspection and basic functionality tests. That's not enough. We need deeper analysis, molecular scanning, component-level diagnostics, historical verification. Morlack said, that level of testing would make trades take forever. Better slow than a scam, Jack said in response. We built this exchange on trust. The only way to keep that trust is to show that every part is real beyond a reasonable doubt. And what about the victims? Rivik asked. What about us? Jax looked right into the Celestian's many eyes. You're right, you were cheated because our system broke down. The exchange will replace your parts from our reserve stock. It'll hurt our business, but it's the right thing to do. That sets a dangerous precedent, said Yesik, a reptilian Sethian elder. You're responsible for all fraud if the exchange guarantees every trade. That's an impossible burden. Then we make it impossible to commit fraud, Jack said. Or as close to impossible as we can get. The next 3 days were a blur of hard work. Jax put together a group of the station's best technical minds and told them to come up with a verification protocol that could find even the most advanced counterfeits. Lauren Hayes, who had worked with cargo before, came up with ideas for how to verify materials. Kravik made a molecular scanner that could look at parts at the atomic level and find problems with how they were made. Tekrix made a database that compared the serial numbers of parts to historical records and marked any problems. Quilmera, on the other hand, was the one who fixed the main issue. We're not thinking about this the right way, the Kolari said during a brainstorming session. We're trying to prove that a part is real, which means ruling out an infinite number of fakes. Instead, we should prove its history. Explain, Jack said, rubbing his tired eyes. Quilmera's tentacles danced with joy. Every part has a story. It was made in a certain place, put on a certain ship, and put through certain conditions. Those conditions leave marks like tiny stress patterns, molecular signatures, and radiation exposure profiles. If we can prove that the story matches the claimed provenance, we can prove that it is real. The young engineer Marcus Chen leaned forward. Like geological dating but for parts of a starship. We're not just checking to see if it works, we're also checking to see if it lived the life it says it did. That's right, Quilmera said. A fake sensor array might work perfectly, but it won't have the radiation damage from years in a military vessel's hull or the stress fractures from high-energy scanning operations. Those are very hard to fake. Jax felt a spark of hope. Is it really possible for us to do this? Check for that level of historical accuracy? Yes, with the right tools, Tekrix said, already doing the math. We'd have to make our scanning much better. And the verification process would take hours instead of minutes. Morlack said, we have fake parts to study. We can use them to improve our detection methods and find the signs of counterfeiting. Okay, let's do it, Jack said. I don't care if it takes a week to check a part. We're building trust, and trust needs certainty. They gave it the name, Historical Verification Protocol. Every part that came into the exchange's stock went through a strict process. Molecular scanning found manufacturing signatures and verified the authenticity of materials. Stress analysis showed usage patterns that were the same as or different from what was claimed in the history. Radiation profiling revealed exposure to certain stellar environments. Cross-referencing serial number databases with manufacturing records and ship registries. The first part they tested with the full protocol was a hyperdrive coil that they said came from a Terran military cruiser. The surface looked great and the tests of how well it worked went well. The historical verification protocol, on the other hand, told a different story. Radiation profile is wrong, Tekrix said as he looked over the scans. This coil shows exposure to the electromagnetic spectrum of a civilian trade route, not military patrol zones. And the stress patterns show that it was used for low-intensity purposes, like hauling cargo instead of fighting. Jax asked, so it's not real? No, it's real, Tekrix said. But it's not from a military cruiser. It's probably from a civilian freighter, which means it's not as rare or valuable as they say. Jack slowly nodded. So we put it in a new category. It's still useful and valuable, but we're honest about where it came from. People quickly learned about the new verification protocol. Some traders complained about how long the tests took. But most people understood why it had to be done. The exchange's reserves sent the 5 traders who had been cheated new parts that were certified under the new rules. Jax hated giving up those parts, but it was necessary to keep his reputation. 2 weeks after putting the historical verification protocol into place, they caught another fake attempt. Silix, a trader from Vrexia, tried to sell a rare military-grade power coupling. The part looked great and worked perfectly. But the stress analysis showed that it had been made recently, not decades ago as claimed. The molecular signature showed that chemical treatments had been used to make it look older than it really was. Jax confronted Silix in the main office, where the fake coupling was on the desk. Jax said in a low voice, "This is a good fake. Whoever made it knew how starship parts worked and how things age. But they didn't think about how to check the history." Silix's antennae drooped in defeat. "I needed real parts because my ship is dying. I thought I could trade one fake for something real." "You'd have cheated someone else out of your place?" Jax said to finish. "Passed your problem on to them. That's exactly what we're trying to stop here. So you'll tell on me? Stop me from trading?" Jax looked at the Vrexian, who was in a lot of pain. He saw himself 4 months ago when he was stuck, scared, and ready to do anything to stay alive. He was angry when he found out about the fake money, but he also felt sorry for the person who was in an impossible situation. Finally, Jax said, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can leave now, banned from the exchange, still stuck and in need. Or you can stay and work for the exchange as part of the verification team, earning honest parts through hard work. We need people who know how to fake parts. You can help us find fakes." Silix's compound eyes got bigger. "You would trust me after this?" "I'd give you a chance to earn trust," Jax said again. "Everyone here is desperate. The only thing that separates honest people from thieves is how desperate they are. I'd rather give you a way to survive honestly than make you lie more." The Vrexian's translator made a noise that could have been emotion. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because I know what it's like to be stuck and have no hope," Jax said. "The component exchange is here to help people stay alive. That includes you if you're willing to be honest." Silix lowered its head and its antennae shook. "I agree. And I'm really sorry." "Then let's use that technical knowledge for good," Jax said as he stood up and held out his hand. "Welcome to the group." The attempted counterfeiting incident changed the course of the component exchange. Every exchange in the galaxy that was part of the historical verification protocol used it. People were free to share the process, along with detailed instructions on how to use the scanning technology and analytical methods. Some exchanges came up with their own new ideas, like biological authentication for organic parts and quantum signature verification for high-tech electronics. But more importantly, how Jax dealt with the situation showed what the exchange stood for. They didn't just stop fraud, they also dealt with the need that caused it. People who were caught trying to cheat weren't just banned, they were given honest ways to stay alive. 3 months after Silix joined the verification team, he was one of their best fraud detection experts. The Vrexian was very useful for finding complex fakes because it knew how to use deceptive techniques. Silix told new verifiers in a training session, "I know how criminals think because I was one. Desperation makes smart people do dumb things. Our job isn't just to catch fraud, it's to stop it from happening in the first place by making sure that everyone has fair access to honest trade." Jax watched the training session from the back of the room and felt proud. This was what the component exchange was supposed to be like. Not just a market but a community based on values that were important. Clear. Being honest, being kind, and being responsible at the same time. That night, Tecrix found him where he usually was, by the viewport, watching salvage teams work on the wreck field. "The quarterly reports are put together," the Vrexian said. "We've helped with more than 2,000 trades this month. 97 ships have been fixed so they can fly again. And the rate of fraud has dropped to less than 0.1%. "That's good," Jax said. "But not perfect. Perfection is impossible. But we've made something strong enough to last through imperfection. That might be more valuable." Jax thought about that, being strong versus being perfect. The old credit system tried to be perfect by using quantum encryption that couldn't be broken, being accepted everywhere, and making transactions happen right away. But when it broke in a big way because it wasn't strong enough. The component exchange was slower, harder to use, and needed more trust and verification. But it could survive fraud, counterfeiting, and bad people because it was based on things that could be tested and proven in real life. "Do you know what scares me?" Jax said in a low voice. "That we'll get lazy and think the system works and stop being careful. We'll fail like the old system did if we stop checking, stop questioning, and stop keeping our standards." "Then we don't get too comfortable," Tecrix said simply. "We make vigilance a part of our culture. We tell every new trader and exchange operator that trust needs to be checked all the time." "Trust but check," Jax said quietly. "It's an old saying from Earth, isn't it?" "Yeah. I guess it also applies to parts of starships." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the salvage operation move across the asteroid field. 78 other component exchanges were doing similar work somewhere out there. Each one was independent, but they were all connected by shared principles. It wasn't great, but it was real, strong, and helping thousands of people survive an economic collapse that had left them stuck. That was all. For now, it was more than enough. 6 months after Nira Vex left, she came back to Waystation Theta 7. When the alert came in, Jax was in charge of putting in a new molecular scanner. It was a consortium-class ship asking for docking clearance, the same ship that had been there before. Lauren Hayes said under her breath, "This should be interesting," as she wiped the grease off her hands. They saw Nira in the main conference room, but this time the merchant had company. She had brought 7 people with her who were there to represent important business interests from all over the Inner Rim. Jax knew 2 of the species but not the others. This showed how bad the economic crisis had gotten. "Mr. Rivera," Nira said, and Jax saw that her smile was more forced than before. "Thanks for coming to see us." "Just Jax," he said as he sat down in his chair. The full Exchange Council sat next to him. It included Tecrix, Morlack, Quilmera, Lauren, and 5 other people who represented different trade areas. "What makes you come back?" A tall Celestian with midnight blue chitin, one of Nira's friends, spoke up. "We've been keeping an eye on how your business is growing. There are now 137 component exchanges in the galaxy, and they do about 8,000 trades every day. Your method has been used by colonies, space stations, and even some planetary governments. That's what happens when you give away good ideas," Jax said. "They spread." "Yes," the Celestian said. "But this success has brought about new problems. Exchanges need to work together, verification protocols need to be standardized, and disputes need to be resolved across long distances. These things require infrastructure that individual exchanges can't provide on their own." Tecrix's antennae shook. "And you're willing to build that infrastructure for a price?" Nira bent down. "We're suggesting a federation. The component exchanges would stay independent businesses, but they would be connected by a shared network for sharing information, standardizing training, and settling disputes. The Orion Consortium would provide the technology and administrative support." Morlack asked directly, "In exchange for what?" "A small fee," said another delegate, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. 2% of all verified component values moving through the network." Jax felt the familiar twist in his stomach. Here it was again, the effort to add a middleman to make money by making transactions easier instead of by doing real work. "No," he said without any hesitation. Nira said, "You haven't heard the whole proposal." "I don't have to," Jax said. "You want to tax trades. You want to make money from the links between exchanges. That's exactly what I said no to 6 months ago." The Celestian said, 6 months ago you had 15 people on one asteroid. You have thousands of beings working on different systems now. The problems with coordination are real, Jax. Just ignoring them won't make them go away." "We're not ignoring them," Quilmera said. "We're dealing with them through voluntary cooperation. Exchanges share information freely, help each other solve problems, and come to informal agreements on how things should be done." The woman with gray hair said, "That's chaos that doesn't work. You need rules, structure, and agreements that everyone agrees to." "We need to be strong," Jax said. "Which comes from independence, not consolidation. The moment we make a central network that all exchanges depend on, we've made a single point of failure and a target for control." Nira's clear features showed that she was angry. "You're being unreasonably paranoid." "Am I?" Jax got up and walked to the window that looked out over the salvage yards. The Galactic Credit was a centralized network. Look how that worked out. Every exchange that connects to your proposed federation becomes dependent on it. You control the infrastructure, you control the information flow, and eventually you control the entire system. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not intentionally, but power concentrates. It always does." The Celestian asked, "So your answer is eternal fragmentation? A galaxy of separate exchanges that can never grow or work more efficiently?" Instead of imposing, Jax said, "My solution is emergence." He turned back to face them. "Let exchanges work together when it makes sense to do so. Let standards grow naturally by using what works. Don't force unity. Instead, let people connect without becoming dependent on each other." One of Nira's delegates, which looked like a moving fungal colony in a clear containment suit, spoke for the first time, and its translator made a rustling sound. "That's a nice way of thinking. But philosophy doesn't settle disputes between exchanges. What happens when a trader from my exchange says that your exchange is committing fraud? Who decides? How do we make sure that decisions are followed across different exchanges?" It was a fair question, and Jax had been thinking about it a lot. The exchange network was growing faster than its ways to settle disputes could keep up with. They had already seen how different verification standards between exchanges could cause problems. How did you keep things fair and of good quality without a central authority? Silix came into the room with a data crystal before Jax could answer. The reformed counterfeiter had been listening in on the conversation through the comm system. Sorry to interrupt, Silix said, and its translator said sorry. But I think I can help with that worry. The Vrexian walked up to the conference table and used the crystal to make a hologram. It showed a network diagram with all 137 exchanges as nodes and lines connecting them that showed how they talked to each other and how they traded. I've been looking at how data moves between exchanges, Silix said. I'm looking for patterns in how disputes naturally resolve. What I've found is that exchanges already form clusters based on proximity, technology compatibility, and trust relationships. When disputes happen, they're usually settled by asking exchanges with expertise in the relevant area. The hologram changed to show different clusters. For example, exchanges that mostly deal with Vrexian technology tend to talk to each other about verification standards. Exchanges in the same field work together on problems that are specific to their region. It's a self-organizing system, arbitration based on proven expertise rather than imposed authority. The fungal delegate leaned closer to the display. But this is informal and inconsistent. It's resilient, Silix cut in, surprising Jax because the once timid Vrexian had become confident. There isn't just one way to run things that can be corrupted or compromised. If one cluster's standards drop, the others can refuse to trade with them until the problems are fixed. Quality control is done through voluntary association instead of top-down enforcement. Jax felt a surge of pride. Silix had said something that he had felt but couldn't put into words. The component exchange network wasn't chaotic. It was self-organizing, like a natural ecosystem finding balance through countless small interactions. Nira's delegation exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this level of analysis. This is interesting, the Celestian said. But it still has problems with efficiency. Sharing information is random. Training is very different from one exchange to the next. Deployment of technology is not coordinated. All true, Tecrix agreed. But open-source solutions are better than centralized control. We already freely share verification protocols. We could do more of that by making a shared repository of best practices, training materials, and technology specifications. Any exchange can add to it, and any exchange can access it. Without gatekeepers, Morlack added. Without fees or licenses. Just sharing knowledge for everyone's benefit. Lauren Hayes nodded. It's like the internet on old Earth before it became a business. It was open, collaborative, and messy but creative. Jax watched Nira's face closely. He could see the numbers running through her mind, the realization that her group's proposal was being systematically torn apart not by rejection, but by better options. You're describing digital communism, the gray-haired woman said with disgust. I'm describing practical cooperation, Jax said. We're not giving things away because of our beliefs. We're sharing knowledge because it makes all exchanges stronger, which makes the whole network more resilient. Your consortium model makes us see each other as competitors, but we prefer to see each other as partners facing a common challenge. The translator for the fungal delegate thought for a moment. That makes sense, but it needs a level of trust and cooperation that seems optimistic given the current crisis. Trust has to start somewhere, Quilmera said. We chose to start by proving we could be trusted. We shared our methods openly, kept strict standards, and dealt with fraud with compassion but also accountability. Other exchanges have done the same. Nira stood up, her crystalline body stiff with barely contained anger. You're choosing naive idealism over practical solutions. Don't expect us to help you again when this informal network falls apart because it's not working. If we fall apart, it will be because we didn't stick to our principles, not because we didn't have centralized control, Jax said quietly. And if that happens, at least we'll have failed trying to build something better instead of rebuilding what already failed. The delegation left looking very disappointed. The council sat quietly for a long time after they left. That was risky, Lauren finally said. They had resources that could have helped. At a cost we couldn't afford, Jax said. The moment we accept their infrastructure, we accept their influence. Better to grow slowly with independence than quickly with dependence. Tecrix said, they'll be back. This crisis isn't going away. When normal solutions keep failing, they'll have to work within systems like ours, on our terms or not at all. Tecrix's prediction came true sooner than expected. 3 weeks later, Jax got a message from an unexpected source. The Terran Colonial Authority, one of the largest government bodies in human history. They had been keeping an eye on the component exchange network and wanted to talk about getting official support and recognition. The call came from Administrator Elena Vasquez, a strict woman in her 50s who was in charge of the authority's Economic Recovery Task Force. "Mr. Rivera," she said without wasting any time, "your component exchange method has made trade stable in 17 Terran colonies. That's more success than any government program has had in the 6 months since the credit collapse." "That's good to hear," Jack said carefully. "What do you want?" "To help. The Terran Colonial Authority can give us legitimacy, a legal framework and resource support. We could set up component exchanges as officially recognized trading systems in human space." "With what strings attached?" Administrator Vasquez smiled slightly. "Direct, I appreciate that. We would want oversight, not control but verification that exchanges meet minimum standards. Protection against fraud, ensuring fair practices, that sort of thing." Jax leaned back in his chair and thought. It might help if the government recognized them, as this would give them legal protections, access to resources and official approval. But it could also mean rules, red tape and political meddling. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. But Mr. Rivera, Jax, I want you to understand something. The Terran Colonial Authority isn't trying to take over your system. We're drowning here. Normal government functions have collapsed along with the credit system. We're looking for any solution that works and you've built one. We want to support it, not control it." There was real exhaustion in her voice and Jax believed her. These people weren't business leaders trying to make money. They were government officials trying to keep society running. "Let me talk to my counsel," Jax said. "Can you send me more information about what you're suggesting?" "I'll send you a proposal within the hour. Thank you for considering it." After the call, Jack sat in his office, which used to be a storage room and still smelled faintly of lubricant, and thought about what had just happened. 6 months ago he was just a mechanic who crashed on an asteroid. Now he was talking to government officials about economic policy. It was crazy. It was scary. It was necessary. The council debate over the colonial authority's proposal lasted 2 full days. Some members thought that government recognition would protect and validate them. Some people were afraid it was the first step toward co-optation and control. The arguments went in circles until Quilmera finally suggested a compromise. "What if we accept recognition but not integration?" the Kolari asked. "The government recognizes component exchanges as real trading systems. We agree to minimum transparency standards. But we don't become part of the government's infrastructure. We stay independent civil institutions. Like non-profit organizations," Lauren said, thinking. "Recognized but not controlled." "Exactly. The government can't tell us what to do, but they can protect us legally and give us resources. We stay independent while gaining legitimacy." Jax thought about it. Quilmera's description of the arrangement was fragile and needed both sides to respect each other's space. But it might work. Tekrick said, "We'd need protections written into the agreement. Clear limits on what the government can do and guarantees of operational independence." Morlack added, "And those protections would have to apply to everyone. Not just with the Terran Colonial Authority, but with any government that recognizes exchanges." Over the next week, they worked out the details with Administrator Vasquez. The agreement made component exchanges independent civil institutions for economic coordination. Governments could recognize them, give them money and legal protections, but they couldn't tell them what to do or override their own rules. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. When the agreement was signed, Jack stood in the main conference room and spoke to the council. "This is a big step," he said. "We're getting recognition from governments, which means we're becoming part of official economic infrastructure. But we're doing it on our own terms, staying independent and not becoming bureaucratic arms of the state. Do you think other governments will follow the Terran Authority's lead?" Serene asked. "Some will," Jack said. "Some won't, and that's fine. Exchanges can work with or without government recognition. But having some official support and a legal framework helps." Silix spoke up, getting more confident with each council meeting. "It also sends a message that component exchanges are not just temporary fixes, but real alternatives to credit-based systems. These are institutions worth keeping even if the old economy gets better." Jax thought this. There was still no sign of a stable replacement for galactic credits 6 months into the crisis. Governments and businesses were trying out different options like quantum-secure currencies, blockchain-based systems, and even standards based on precious metals. But none of them had taken off. The component exchange network, on the other hand, kept growing, making trades easier and helping beings stay alive. It wasn't pretty or efficient, but it was real and it worked. Jax thought that was enough sometimes. 10 months after the stellar drift crashed on Waystation Theta 7, there were 312 independent exchanges on the component exchange network, spread out over 73 systems. Jax stood on the observation deck of what had once been the central hub. It was a converted cargo bay with windows that looked out over the asteroid field. A lot had changed at the salvage yard. Now organized sections showed the different types of ships and parts. The automated sorting equipment, which was made from salvaged parts, and the fabrication unit they had bought from Zilix, worked quickly on incoming wrecks. But it was harder to put numbers on the real changes. There were now 248 beings living permanently at Waystation Theta 7. What had started as a group of refugees who were stuck had turned into a community. Now families lived here. Kids played in the hallways that were under pressure. A Kelturian couple even opened a restaurant that served food from a mix of cultures, all of which they paid for with component trades. The economy had really become a circle. In exchange for parts, mechanics fixed ships. Cooks made food and got paid in salvage. Engineers built infrastructure and were paid with rare parts. Value didn't move around as abstract credits. It moved around as real goods and services, and each trade was good for both sides. "It's amazing," said Administrator Vasquez next to him. She had come that morning for an official inspection, along with people from 6 other government agencies that were also thinking about signing similar recognition agreements. "It's messy," Jack said with a tired smile. "But it works." Vasquez said, "That's what makes it so special. Every economic model I looked at promised beauty, efficiency, and optimization. The system you've built isn't any of those things. But it's strong and real, and it helps real people survive." An alert went off on Jax's datapad. Another ship is asking for permission to dock. This is the 15th one today. He looked at the specs. A Kolari colony ship with 300 refugees from a failed settlement. They were out of resources and needed parts to get to a safer system. Jack said to Vasquez, "Excuse me. Emergency coming in." He saw that Tecrix was already in charge of the docking process. The colony ship was huge, at least 10 times bigger than any other ship they had ever worked with. Its power systems were failing and its life support was barely working. "They need a total overhaul," Tecrix said with a frown. "New reactors, new atmosphere processors, and repairs to the structure. All Class A parts." "Do we have any stock?" Jax asked. "Some. Not enough. We'd have to collect parts from a lot of wrecks and hope that the right ones still work." Jax opened the component database, his mind racing with ideas. 300 beings counting on them to find answers. This was more than just a problem for one person. It was a problem for the whole community. "Call an assembly," he said. "Everyone who knows what they're doing. And let the 3 closest exchanges know. See if they have extra reactors or atmosphere systems." Within an hour, the main conference room was full of engineers, mechanics, salvage experts, and trade coordinators. Jax put the plans for the colony ship on the wall. "Here's what's going on," he said. 300 Kolari refugees need a lot of repairs to keep going. We don't have all the parts we need in stock, but we might be able to put together what they need with our salvage skills and our network. I need ideas." People in the room started talking. Technical arguments about compatibility, ideas for creative solutions, and offers of personal parts from people who are willing to put off their own repairs to help refugees. In the next 3 hours, a plan came together that would have been impossible in the old credit economy. They would take a reactor from an abandoned Celestian cruiser and modify it to work with the Kolari ship's power grid using parts from 4 different places. 2 different wrecks would provide the parts for the atmosphere processors, which would be put together and calibrated to work as a hybrid system. Hull plates from a broken-down freighter would make weak points in the structure stronger. It wasn't pretty. It went against a dozen rules set by the manufacturer. But the engineers who were there were sure it would work. "Timeline?" Jax asked. Morlach thought it would take 8 days if we work around the clock. Assuming there aren't any big problems. "Cost?" That was the voice of the colony ship's captain, a Kolari named Shermara, who had been quietly watching the conversation. "What do you need in return?" Jax looked around the room and saw that everyone was thinking the same thing. These were refugees, people who had lost everything. It didn't feel right to ask for money. But the exchange couldn't work on donations. They needed parts to help other people. "What can you give?" he asked softly. Shamara's tentacles fell. "We have fabrication equipment, which is the colony's manufacturing infrastructure. We were going to use it at our destination, but if it means survival. The Kalari stopped and the translator's voice was sad. We can sell it. Jax could feel how heavy that offer was. This equipment was their future and their chance to build a new home.